So what is the relevance of today's topic? Surgical approaches to eyelid tumors. Actually, it carries its relevance from the fact that it could be either for definitive treatment or as a palliation. And following the surgery, the post-surgical functional eyelid is very important because it affects the vision, it affects the tear integrity and the drainage, as along it being important for the aesthetics of the face. Basically, through this talk for the postgraduates, they would get to know when to do, what to know before you actually sit down to do it, what and how to do, and what can go wrong. And then I will follow it up with some illustrative cases. So we need to take the decision for surgery only after we have established a clinical diagnosis and determined the extent of the tumor. The purpose has been established, which is either therapeutic or palliative. Before embarking, it is important to know that the eyelid is a lamellar structure. And interestingly, the parts of the eyelid have different lamellae. Like the tarsal part has only two lamellae, the anterior and the posterior. But the preseptal area has another lamella, which is the middle lamella, which is called because of the orbital septum, the fat, and the upper eyelid retractors. The skin, as has been highlighted earlier, is of course the thinnest in the body. And this is important because we need to choose our grafts accordingly. And the skin which most commonly matches is the contralateral eyelid or the retroauricular skin. The tarsus is a very important part of the eyelid, which is important for the stability. And therefore, when you substitute the tarsus, you need to ensure that it is well contoured and smooth. Beyond that, a knowledge of the anatomy is important. All the grafts should be placed close to the arcades. And also we have to keep in mind that the lymphatics go to the preauricular and the submandibular area. This is important in the preoperative assessment, as it was already said. And secondly, it has a bearing on the post-surgical outcome. Now, as far as the lower eyelid is concerned, gravity and the retractor forces will affect the outcome of the surgery. Patient factors in form of the age, the comorbidities are important. Age, because with age, the nature of the skin changes. And what may appear large in a younger skin may be small for an elderly skin. I'll come to that later. Size and orientation of the defects, the vascular supply to the surrounding tissue, the biological behavior of the treatment, and the previous treatments that have been taken. If any radiation has been done or there is a previous scar, everything is going to impact the outcome of surgery. So let's look at the defects. In a young individual where the lids are tight, around 30% of a lid gap is called as a small defect, 45% around a medium, and more than 55% of loss is treated as a large defect. Whereas in an older person where the skin is lax and it can be stretched, you can afford to have a larger defect in a smaller category. Now, the defect may be of the lid alone, or it may include the canthi. Then the management will change. The involvement of the lid margin is also very crucial in deciding what procedure has to be taken. If the margin is intact, you can go through with a local flap or a skin graft. Now, the presentation may be because of removal of a primary tumor, or sometimes part of the tumor has been removed for biopsy. And then the patient will come to you for removal of the tumor along with lid notch, epiphora, corneal exposure, lack of thalamus. All these would be added. So how do you ascertain the extent and the collateral damage? The extent is basically clinical and radiological. Why do you need radiology? Because you need to know whether the lid lesion is limited to the lid or has gone into the orbit. What is the collateral damage? It does on the medial side mostly to the lacrimal system. So always remember that after a clinical evaluation, you have to follow it up with a CT or an MR, edge biopsy if it is required, then you stage, and then you look for the sentinel lymph node. If it is negative, then it goes to the plasty section, and if it turns out positive, it goes to the head and neck. And you need to remember that the predictors of prognosis, as we had talked earlier, were the large size, the incomplete excision, vegetoid spread, a multicentric origin, and a poor differentiation. The wide excisional margin for basal cell carcinomas is usually 4 millimeters, sebaceous is 5, and for squamous is anything between 4 to 6. We talked of intraoperative frozen section. If it's not available, then you do a permanent section control, conjunctival map biopsies, delayed reconstruction. Now, what are your options? All this knowledge is background knowledge, which prepares you for your surgical approach. So if you have a small defect with adequate local tissue, and how do you know that the tissue is adequate? I've drawn this by hand and tried to show that you pull the edge of the cut edge. If they get approximated, you have adequate local tissue. Go in for a direct suturing. First suture the deeper layers, and then you suture the anterior layers, and you finally get a straight line. If the local tissue is inadequate, there is stretch, then what do you do? There's wound tension. Then you combine with tissue from the neighboring area. If it's on the lateral side, you do a cantholysis and you cut the upper crux of the lateral canthus. If it is on the medial side, then what do you do? You can't cut anything there. So you undermine the local tissue. And this is how you do a canthotomy, straight, identify the crux, either in the upper lid or the lower lid, as the case may be, and then you cut the crux. Now, what do you do for moderate sized defects? The commonest is that you take the Tenzel's rotation flap. So this is a very versatile flap and can be taken both for the upper lid and the lower lid. So if you're treating the upper lid lesion, you reverse the Tenzel. And if you are treating the lower lid region, of course, you take it as a direct Tenzel. What do you do for larger sized tumors? The larger sized tumor has a longer list of options. So the commonest one in the hands of the oculoplastic surgeons is the Cutler-Beard procedure. This is basically a sharing procedure. There is a defect in the upper lid. You close and approximate and see what is the minimum gap you get. Now, for the size of the minimum gap, you mark out the lower lid. And then you extend it in the form that you get this free flap here. You pull it from under this lid bridge and take it and fit it into the upper lid defect, while taking care that you have maximum caution while suturing the conjunctiva, because this lid is going to be closed for at least 6 weeks. And you can't afford to have a suture or something, which is going to be irritating the ocular surface. You maintain the integrity of the lower fornix by drawing the flap. And while dividing the bridge, always remember that you need to angle the scissors upwards so that your conjunctival lamella is longer than the skin lamella. The next common flap is the Hughes flap. Now, what do you do here? In the upper lid, you evert it on a Demers retractor, pull out a tarsoconjunctival flap, fix it into the lower lid, and then cover this with a skin flap, skin graft. Now, these are what are called as flaps. They are based on an artery and then you just pull the tissue. So you can either have an advancement flap, which is a direct pull, or you have a transpositional flap, or you have a rotation flap. Complications are usually mild and acceptable. You may get some marginal abnormalities, which can be treated. There are lid positional abnormalities. Corneal injury may take place, which is best avoided. And cosmetically, the pigment defects, a little swelling because of lymphedema, loss of lashes, and of course, a scar. Now, this is what chronic lymphedema looks like. This is a large sebaceous gland carcinoma treated by Cutler Beard. And this elderly gentleman, this swelling just persisted. Sometimes you get this conjunctival hypertrophy. Follow-up protocol is that you see the patient on day 1, then call for removal of sutures after 1 week. And if you have other options, like you have other grafts, you may call them later. So I will now run through some illustrative cases because most of the postgraduates would want to know what is done for which case. For benign superficial lesions, partial thickness defects occur. Deep fullness, they are usually not there. Margin clearance is not needed. So small recent onset nevus, excised locally, treated with sutures. Another cutaneous hemangioma, excised locally. I just sealed it with the patient's own blood. I didn't apply any suture. Just a little pressure. There was no tension on the wound. This is a pyogenic granuloma. It was excised. You see a very nice clean excision. Sometimes these pyogenic granulomas have large crustings. So you don't need to treat them like malignancies. The moment you pick it up, this whole thing comes off. The infection and the basal scan, just take a small part for biopsy from here. This is a small meibomian cyst at the angle. It was excised and you see a clean result. This is a kissing nevus. The upper eyelid lesion was excised. A bridge was taken from the lower lid. And finally, this lower lesion was excised and a post-auricular graft was applied on that. Now, this is a cutaneous horn. It was shown in one of the earlier talks. This was excised and the base is sent for biopsy. This is a squamous papilloma, again excised. Inclusion cyst, again a superficial excision. Now this brings me to the malignant part. I see I'm running out of time. So direct closure with canthotomy. This here again, this patient has a direct closure with a good result. He's able to close his eyes. Again, a direct closure. You see the amount of lax skin, hardly you see the scar. Again, a medial lesion, medial undermining. Now, this is an example of a flap. You see, there's hardly any evidence that she has been operated. Again here, excise, do a transpositional flap here. Another example of a flap. For lower lids, it works very well. This is a full tarsoconjunctival flap with a pre or post-auricular skin additional skin was taken. Hughes tarsoconjunctival flaps. This is an advancement flap. You see this whole tissue on the lateral part was advanced here. Again, a flap advancement. Examples of the same. Cutler Beard is a very, very versatile procedure. I've used it in almost, I think, most lesions of the upper lid, right from any site, any size. Lateral part, a medial lesion, a full lid, full thickness defect. You see, look at the size of the lid defect. But because this is old skin, it is very forgiving. It can stretch and accommodate a lot of defect. 2/3 of the eyelids here was involved. Angled it a little laterally, medially, And you see what a beautiful contour and result. There is a little hypopigmentation, but the patient wasn't bothered by it. Another lesion where there is a huge lateral lid lesion with the extension. We virtually came up to the canthus on the lateral side and the medial to 1/3 on the inner side. Now, this is a lady who had Cutler-Beard procedure for her upper eyelid lesion primarily. And then she developed a new lesion in her lower lid, along with lymph nodes. So sometimes you need to treat their recurrence, and then you need the help of a surgical oncologist. She underwent radical neck dissection. Large tumors, of course, sometimes we are not very fortunate and we need to exenterate these patients. This is another patient who had exenteration done. Now, sometimes, even after exenteration, they are unfortunate and they develop these recurrences. So follow-up is a very, very integral part of the surgical management of the tumor. This is another lady who had a sebaceous gland carcinoma. It looked small, but intraoperatively, I was in a doubt. And I virtually excised her whole lid. This was an impromptu decision. So I did part forehead flap, part glabellar flap. She did fairly well for about 3 years that I last saw her. This is another patient. We did just the pre-COVID period. This patient is lost to follow-up. This is a patient of xeroderma who has this lateral temporal flap, which we had fashioned for the lower lid lesions. You can see that the gravity has played a part. It's bulky and it is sagging. It's inadequate. Thankfully, he's got a good bells and there is no corneal exposure. Now, this is a basal cell carcinoma in a young male. It was really, really large and it left a very large defect on table. We fashioned a huge medial flap, rotated it. He's still under follow-up. This is another lady who had a direct closure for the upper lid and an advancement flap for the lower eyelid. Very old lady, lot of cardiological comorbidities, who unfortunately had a carancular lesion and a basal cell carcinoma here on the skin. Very deep, skin was fixed. So here we just did a palliative surgery and we put her on imiquimod. Now this is a cheek advancement flap. You see this huge tumor here, very large defect. It is this large cheek rotation flap has been performed. Now this is composite treatment. Large tumor, NACT was given, and following the NACT, then this composite flap was done. Another patient where we did a forehead flap, but she was unfortunate, and then she developed these metastases. Another lady who had an exenteration, but had recurrences. You can see the large lymph nodes also. And here again, a patient who has, after his 6 months of exenteration, developed this submandibular metastasis.
Maybe you should conclude, doctor.
Yeah, almost. This is the last slide. So principles of reconstructive surgery are applicable and there are no major controversies in dealing with these patients. Of course, we need advances in substitute materials, which is a topic of research. Use of wound modifiers in the post-surgical period can lessen the impact, and telemedicine can be harnessed to catch small lesions. And thank you for your very patient hearing and the invitation to share this platform.